terms of influence, the educational system of the Philippines was immensely influenced by the colonial history of the country, including the Spanish period, the Japanese rule and occupation, and the American period. Although the education system was significantly influenced by all colonizers, the most influential and profound contributions occurred during the American occupation in 1898. During this period, English was introduced as the primary language of instruction, and the public education system was established for the first time. A system is specifically modeled after the United States school system and further administered by the newly established Department of Instruction. United States shaded the almost half of our educational system as an evidence in relevance to the educational reforms is the K-12 curriculum. Our country has undergone many changes and development in recent years. The continuous process has had a great impact on the lives of millions of Filipinos. Relatively speaking, the changes have brought us benefits, not to mention the disadvantages they have brought, causing downfall to many people. There are numerous questions about the issues and problems that exist in our educational system, such as educational strategic goals, structure, curricula, teaching learning methodologies, socio-economic aspects, financing, non-formal education, and formal education. And these issues will be further discussed by the group.
The first issue in the Philippines educational system is the educational strategic goals. Goals, indicators, and targets are important. They are tools we use to force ourselves to be disciplined, focused, and accountable. The primary role of learning goals is to set clear expectations for governments, schools, and students. It's about setting a moral standard that guides action, or to put it more technocratically, we need them as the basis for results-based management. Such standards must be few, concrete, and understandable to large numbers of people. They must form the basis for a mass communications campaign that mobilizes the commitment and support of teachers, parents, students, and society at large. They must be measured with validity and reliability in order to be credible and secure the trust of citizens. They must present meaningful results, such as children becoming fluent in reading and writing, that appeal to our deepest sense of what is right and worthy of honor. Now, what are the goals in the Philippines educational system? The Philippines educational strategic goal is that by 2022, they will have a nation-loving and competent lifelong learner able to respond to challenges and opportunities through quality, accessible, relevant, and liberating K-12 program delivered by a modern, professional, proactive, nimble, trusted, and nurturing educational department. Hence, the subsequent goals are to expand access to basic education, improve quality and relevance, modernize education management and governance. However, the following issues could affect the success of these educational strategic goals. First, equity in education. The economic and class divide of Philippine society has long been a fundamental issue in Philippine education. Students from wealthy families in cities and some highly urbanized towns have better access to mainly private and expensive schools, whereas students from impoverished families face a dearth of classrooms and teachers as well as nearly inaccessible public schools with minimal resources that instructors are frequently required to give. This circumstance has influenced technical and teaching practices. Next, educational fund. The second problem facing the Philippine education system is the budget for education. Although Philippine Constitution requires the government to allocate the highest percentage of the national budget to education, the Philippines still has one of the lowest budget allocations for education among ASEAN countries. Third, reformation of Philippines' educational system. We all know that students were not developing their critical thinking, problem-solving, or decision-making skills since traditional teaching methods relied on repetition and memorization of knowledge. Students are encouraged to collaborate and become more productive as a result of modern learning. However, in today's educational environment, both conventional and modern teaching approaches are successful and valuable. It's all about balance, as it is with most things. We need to know when a traditional strategy works best and when it's time to attempt something new and innovative approaches. Next issue is regarding the K to 12. The quality of education provided by the system is controversial. In 2014, results from National Achievement Test and National Career Assessment Examination show that the quality of Philippine education has declined at the elementary and secondary levels. Student performance was excessively below the target mean in both NAT and NCAE 2014. The poor quality of Philippines' educational system is evident in the comparison of graduation rates between the highly urbanized city of Metro Manila, which happens to be not only the country's capital, but also the largest metropolitan area in the Philippines, and other places in the country such as Mindanao and Eastern Visayas. Although Manila is able to show an elementary school graduation rate of about 100%, other areas in the country such as Eastern Visayas and Mindanao have elementary school graduation rates of only 30% or even less. This kind of statistic is no surprise to the Philippine education system because students who come from Philippine urban areas have the financial means to complete at least their elementary education. Next is deteriorating quality of education. It is not uncommon for college professors to complain about the quality of the students who come to them. They lament the inability of students to form a correct sentence, let alone a paragraph. Private schools are attacked as profit-driven institutions that produce half-baked graduates who later become part of the nation's educated unemployed. All these indications of the poor quality of education. And the last one is the lack of facilities and shortage of teacher in public schools. Public schools in the Philippines are severely lacking in facilities. These include classrooms, teachers, desks and chairs, textbooks, and audio-video materials. According to 2003 Department Data Education Undersecretary Juan Miguel Luz, over 17 million students are reportedly enrolled in Philippine public schools, with an annual population growth rate of 2. Despite the government's claims of increasing the allocated budget for education, there is a prevailing difficulty facing the public school system in terms of shortages. In addition, state universities and colleges are gradually increasing tuition fees in order to have funds to purchase facilities, making access to tertiary education difficult or often inaccessible to the poor. In order to attain these educational strategic goals, the government should require further debate, in-depth analysis, and immediate resolution to achieve the quality of education that we have sought and longed for.
Hi, my name is Marrianne Correa, and I will be reporting about the issues on the Philippine education system structure. The Philippine education is a product of long history of struggle. Its emergence and development was actually a gradual process, which was also a product of both the colonialism and imperialism generations. Now, there are actually a lot of issues concerning the Philippine education system. However, I have just chosen to discuss quite a few issues that I've found relevant and also needing immediate government action. So, without further ado, let us dig deeper into our very own Philippine education system. The first issue is the employment of K-12 graduates. Now, it is a common fact that the first supply of K-12 graduates, numbering more than 1.2 million, did not make the full cut. This is because, according to a study conducted by the PBED, or the Philippine Business for Education, only about 20% of the country's 70 leading companies across all sectors were inclined to hire senior high school graduates. And one of the reasons behind is a spur study conducted by the PCCI, or the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In a recent TV interview, PCCI actually said that the K-12 graduates are not yet ready for work as they still lack the knowledge and skills for the 21st century, such as innovation and critical thinking skills, which are apparently needed again in the 21st century. Now, PCCI also further added that the current education system still needs a lot of help and improvement. The second issue is the poor marks in international education indices. Now, despite the emergence of the laws like K-12 law, the Univast law, or what we call United Student Financial Assistance System for Tertiary Education, and the Free Higher Education law, still our country, the Philippines, continues to get poor marks in international education performance indices. The World Economic Forum actually released a survey called the Global Competitiveness Index in the 2017 to 2018, where out of the 137 country recipients, the Philippines only ranked 66th in the quality of primary education, 74th in the higher education, and 76th in the quality of math and science education, respectively. Also, the World Economic Forum further stated that this condition actually worsened as per a survey conducted by the Global Innovation Index of 2017, wherein out of the 127 country recipients, the Philippines only ranked 113th in the overall categories. Another issue is the infrastructure and educational technology. Let's talk about infrastructure first. According to the ACT, or the Alliance of Concerned Teachers, there is an ongoing construction of important classrooms to narrow the 113,000 shortage of classrooms as of June 2017. And also, in terms of educational technology, we also have to give equal urgency on the internet connectivity issue. According to the Department of Education, only about 26% of public schools in the Philippines are connected, because most of these public schools are in off-grid locations, which means that telecommunications company is, or it's not possible for telecommunications company to reach their specific locations. And this would mean that the internet subscription is almost close to impossible. And we all know that internet connectivity is one of the key enablers to transform our education system. E-learning platforms and content can empower both teachers and students for a blended and personalized learning, especially in this time of pandemic where we don't have a choice but to embrace online learning. The next issue is reforms and pedagogy. Now, actually, the problem stems from the memorization methods, which are still very much present in both the private and public education system. Our education system actually needs to develop teachers that would definitely employ the so-called reflective teaching, which would allow the students to raise questions, also explore possibilities and different scenarios, as well as engage in discussions or meaningful debate. And last but not the least is focusing on English. Now, a lot of the schools in the Philippines are actually focusing on English, like they wanted their students to be able to speak the so-called beautiful English in order to be employed in call centers. Because let's face it, there is a huge demand of English speakers in the call center industry. They have a very, very a friendly and very high salary package, but then the requirements is not that high. So long as you can speak English, you can definitely be employed in call centers. But let's take into consideration that in foreign countries, call centers are already being replaced by robots. That is why Secretary Briones, one of her statements, she stated that if we continue to have this kind of belief, then there's a possibility that we will be left behind. So she said that instead of focusing on teaching our students to be able to speak English fluently, why not teach them some life skills like analyzing problems, solving problems, and also be able to respond and to accept change because whether they like it or not, when these students graduate, they will not use like 100% of what they learned from school in real life. And it is only in dealing with the change that these students can become more successful in their future lives. So, this is the end of my report. Thank you so much for patiently listening. And again, my name is Marrianne Correa. Have a great day.
Sawadee krap! Hello everyone! Before I will start my report, let me introduce myself. My name is Dexter Montebon, currently working here in Thailand.
Issues in the Philippines educational system. I'm assigned to discuss about curriculum. According to Gary B. White, PASMEP, Education 1992, curriculum is not just a concept, it is a social construction. It involves a content which is determined and presented in a manner which reflects historical circumstances. Since the curriculum is the core of educational efforts, it requires a wide range of reflection and thinking about the conflicts, interrelated and interaction phenomena that it involves. We all know that education in the Philippines has undergone several stages of development, and also curriculum development in the Philippines has been very active and intensified. Are you aware of the nature of the school curriculum in the Philippines? Do you know the recent ideas and innovative dimensions in curriculum to give solutions to the needs and problems of our educational system? Let's define curriculum. Curriculum is a set of subjects approved by the government being taught in the schools. a program that has content of equipping the learners to be literate, gain knowledge, discover new things, and engage oneself in teaching learning process. It is a set of materials to be performed in different activities with the guidance of a teacher, which results to achieve a set of objectives which met the needs of a diverse learners. This time, I will enumerate types of curriculum used in the Philippines. 1. National Elementary School Curriculum NESC in the year 1983 to 2002. 2. Basic Education Curriculum in the year 2002. 3. K-12 Curriculum Program. What are the current issues and concerns regarding the Philippines curriculum? Studies and fact-finding commissions have shown that the deteriorating quality of education is due to the low government budget for education, poor quality of teachers, poor management of schools, poor school facilities such as laboratory and library facilities, poor learning environment, and the content of the curriculum. Issues in curriculum. Hot issues. History is boring. Cooperative learning. Role of education in national development. 10 students in elementary are going to school, 7 students in high school, and 3 students in college. Only one graduated and completed the curriculum. As you can see on the right side, some students are successful, some students are not successful. Role of education in national development. Many students are graduates but few are employed. Curriculum that is not responsive to the basic needs of our country. Constant implementation of programs in education are not properly monitored. To have a good education system, the society and government must work as whole, because the future of society and progress of country is comparatively reflected by the success of students in their education. Thank you and God bless.
Good morning. I'm Christine Kiers and I'll be discussing issues on the Philippine educational system, focusing in teaching learning methodologies in this pandemic time. Every individual is unique. That's why we have different learning styles. It could be verbal, visual, musical auditory, physical kinesthetic, logical mathematical, social, solitary, or a combination of 2 or more. Now, what's your learning style? Because of students' different learning styles, 1,000 teachers, 1,000 methods. That's according to a Chinese proverb, which simply means there are a lot of teaching methodologies we can use to maximize learning. In just a blink of an eye, our lives change unexpectedly, and it has a great impact on Philippine educational system, such as closure of schools in all levels, both public and government institutions, cancellation and postponement of assessment, like licensure examination for teachers, lesser job opportunities for new graduates has been alarming, and an emergence of alternative way of teaching and learning. A shift to online education. But obviously, the Philippines is far from being technologically advanced, being 83rd out of 138 countries in terms of digital readiness, according to the Department of Science and Technology. The Philippines is far too unprepared for the sudden proposal of online learning, but we keep trying. We have two different types of online education, the synchronous and the asynchronous. In the asynchronous, students learn at different times, while in synchronous, students learn at the same time. Communication happens in real time for synchronous, while communication is not live at all in asynchronous. In synchronous, possibly more engaging and effective activities, but in asynchronous, possibly more convenient and flexible. For synchronous, allows for instant feedback and clarification from teachers. But in asynchronous, it allows students to work at their own pace. So they both have their own advantage and disadvantages, right? Examples of synchronous online education is that video conferencing, live chat, live stream, Google Meet, Zoom, and other platforms. While in asynchronous, we have email, screencasts, Flipgrid, videos, blog posts, and comments. Now let's discuss about a few online learning benefits. Number one, it saves time, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, because the recipient learned 5 times more material through e-learning than the conventional methods in the same span of time. Number two, flexible. Its mode of delivery and flexibility makes e-learning more effective because it is in sync with the learners. Number three, energy efficient. It is earth-friendly because reduction in paper and energy consumption slashes the carbon dioxide levels by over 80%. Number four, higher comprehension. Yes, higher comprehension skills because interactive tools through e-learning platforms help the recipient absorb content 60% faster. Amazing. And number five, affordable. Quick and easy access over the internet at a fraction of the cost makes e-learning more affordable than traditional learning. What is modular learning modality? Well, this refers to a learning delivery modality where learning takes place between the teacher and the learners who are geographically remote from each other during instruction. This modality has three types: the modular distance learning or MDL, the online distance learning, the ODL, and the TV radio-based instruction. This alternative learning modality for the new normal is modular distance learning. Modular distance learning features individualized instruction that allows learners to use self-learning modules in print or digital format, electronic copy, or whichever is applicable to the learner. Now, what are the challenges in the new normal in the Philippine educational system? Number one is the online resources, the scarcity for internet access. We have slow internet access, and not everybody has internet connection. We have scarcity of gadgets and devices to use, both students and the teachers. We also have poor ICT skills, both the teacher, the parent, and the students. For the offline resources, our challenge is the availability of materials. We lack books. We lack student readiness. And talking about readiness, the school readiness, are the schools ready? We have problem with classroom size for social distancing, since we have to maintain 1 meter distance from one child to another child. And we also have problems with school sanitation. And lastly, one of the most important factors is that parents' involvement, the parents' time and willingness to teach their kids at home. And of course, let's not forget the parents' educational attainment is also a great factor, simply because we cannot teach what we do not know. The COVID-19 crisis is changing the educational landscape, often in unpredictable ways. It's tough to know exactly what the upcoming school year will look like, but by keeping up on current trends in the educational sphere, you can return to school next year informed whether you're in a classroom or teaching at a distance. I'm Christine Kiers Ubaub. Thank you and good morning.
Hi everyone, I'm Lovely P. Balaba and I'm in Group 6. Our main topic in this group is the issues in Philippine educational system. So now I'm going to discuss my subtopic, which is the socio-economic aspect. Socio-economic aspect. Socioeconomics, also known as social economics, is the social science that studies how economic activity affects and shaped by social processes. In general, it analyzes how modern societies progress, stagnate, or regress because of their local, regional, and global economy. So, socioeconomics or social economics is a social science that investigates how does economic activity influences and is influenced by social processes. Economy. It reflects the kind of education that we have in the country. Example, your income is determined by your job. Your income level is frequently related to your level of education, and your degree of education influences your career opportunities. So according to YAP of 2012, education increases the innovative capacity of an economy and facilitates the diffusion, adoption, and adaptation of new ideas. So, education means that it enables the dissemination, implementation, and adaptation of new ideas. Economy and education should go together and follows a cycle. A stronger economy means a lot for education. So it should be consistent and follow a pattern because a stronger economy has a significant impact on education. For projected expenses about the operations and maintenance of the school, there should be a sufficient funds. So, sufficient finances for planned expenditure related to the school's operations and maintenance. Next is the school should be financially capable of providing the needs of the teachers and the students, such as the learning materials, conducive classrooms, facilities, or equipment, and other important things that would contribute to effective teaching and learning. So, next is the government, non-governmental stakeholders, and private companies. So, aside from what the government can supply, external stakeholders such as non-governmental organizations and private enterprises may fund school activities and programs as part of their overall strategy to assist schools. So, they have enough money allotted for that sponsorship program. And then the cycle continues since the companies need qualified graduates to work for them and enough workforces. So, as we all know, government and non-governmental organizations offers scholarships for the students. It's because businesses require skilled graduates and sufficient workforces. So, back of 2016 said, the greater the initiative of students and develop their skills, the greater the advantage they will utilize their skills in careers to come. It means that the more students take initiative to enhance their skills, the more likely they will be able to apply such skills in the future. As long as there is a proper use of funds, the partnership between the school and the companies becomes successful. The school can ensure now that all students will have enough support. So, if finances are properly allocated and the school business relationship succeeds, the school can now assure that all students receive adequate support, thereby avoiding dropouts and other educational issues that the school must address. Based on the study conducted by Switzerland-based Business School International Institute for Management Development, or the IMD, its director, Arturo Briz, said that the Philippines' ability to equip the economy with the skills it requires has deteriorated, pointing to a mismatch between school curriculums and industry expectations. The last one is the economic-related issues. It is the reason that hinders students from coming to school. And students experience financial constraints in their schooling, particularly in buying things for school, or family income is not enough to support their projects and other basic materials and activities that needs an amount of money. So that's all for my report, and once again, thank you.
Good day, everyone. I am Melanie Fides Oracion. Today, I am going to present one of the most controversial issues that the Philippine educational system is facing for quite a while: the budget for education, or education finance. Although it has been mandated by the Philippine Constitution for the government to allocate the highest proportion of its government to education, Philippines still remains to have one of the lowest budget allocations to education among ASEAN countries. The Philippine budget education as a second priority is a top problem in the educational system. Even though the 1987 Philippine Constitution, Article 13, Section 5 states that the state shall assign the highest budgetary priority to education and ensure that teaching will attract and retain its rightful share of best available talents through, number one, adequate remuneration and other means of job satisfaction and fulfillment. But in reality, most of the budget of the government goes to the payment of debt. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or also known as OECD, has said that levels of education funding do not necessarily affect academic performance. However, these countries spend most money on education as a percentage of their gross domestic product, according to the World Bank. Now, let's take a look at the Philippines budget for education from the year 2010 to 2015. The education sector received the top budget from Aquino's administration. This is in accordance to his goal of education for all children in his 10-point agenda in education and in preparation for the 2016's implementation of the K-12 program. As mentioned by U.S. News Best Countries for Education, those countries that allocated most of their budget to education also have the best educational system. Now, here I can see the relationship between the nation's budget and academic performance. The richest countries in terms of GDP are those that are top performers in terms of education for years. Now, the Philippines, since 2010, the country had apportioned most of its budget to education sector. So what could be the problem here? This boils down to the most problematic issue in our country: corruption. The Philippines has been suffering from corrupt leaders for a very long time. The problem does not lie in the system of education. Whatever system or problem is being implemented, if corruption keeps taking place, it will hinder its success. Now, budget cuts. Budget cuts have created huge problem for most public schools in recent years. Less funding means smaller staff, fewer resources, and lower number of services for students, while some argue that throwing more money at the education problem won't make them go away. Others assert that lack of funding caused many of the problems in the first place. Let me end my presentation by asking these questions. So the government has an increasing approximation of budget for education for years, and allocation for these budgets were really overwhelming. Now for my question one, were these projects really done? Were the school facilities built as planned? Or are they still under construction and remain unfinished? Were the job positions filled? Were the school materials bought? I understand that corruption halts these. Educators, parents, and even the government, we can work hand in hand to solve the problems of Philippine educational system. We can eliminate corruption and promote a better Philippine education. As an educator myself, I am still hoping and still dreaming for an education for a globally competitive nation. That would be all for my presentation. Thank you for watching.
Good day, everyone. My name is Teacher Aldig Nadisa Carumba. So let me continue our discussion with regards to the issues in the Philippine educational system, under which is the non-formal education. So before anything else, let me just give you a brief discussion with regards to the differences between the informal education, the formal education, and the non-formal education. So what is informal education first? Well, informal education, this is a non-targeted learning, and it is also known as, it just happened. So say, for example, we are practicing English because we were traveling. And this type of education, we usually learn this with our daily experiences, and we use our resources from our environment. And for the formal education, please take note that this type of education is a structured, graded, formalized specialization and in hierarchical order, which means that we start from the primary up to the tertiary level. And for the non-formal education, this type of education is usually without any credentials and is short-term, but not always. And this one is individual-centered, more practical, flexible, and the educational activities for this one is outside of the established formal system. So what are the legal basis of the non-formal education? Number one is the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which states that the state shall protect and promote the right of all citizens to quality education at all levels. Please take note, at all levels. And the other one is the RA 9155, which is the Governance Act of Basic Education. This law recognized that ALS, or the alternative learning system, as a complement of formal education and a major component of basic education. So I don't know if you're familiar with our TESDA, And I think they are very active in providing this type of alternative learning system. Another one is the Executive Order number 356, renaming the Bureau of Non-Formal Education to the Bureau of Alternative Learning System, or BALS. Aside from renaming the Bureau, this law also directed BALS to provide a systematic and flexible approach to reach all types of learners outside the school system. And we have the Education for All Plan 2015, wherein one of its main goals is to transform all non-formal and informal education interventions into an ALS to yield more EFA, or Education for All benefits. Now, who finances the non-formal education? We have the Bureau of Alternative Learning System, the local government units, the non-government organizations, our private sectors, and private donors. So what are the major types of non-formal education programs? One is the Basic Literacy Program, which aims to provide illiterate out-of-school children, youth, and adults the basic literacy. And it is a straight literacy program that uses the life skills approach with a modified content according to different learning groups. Please take note, the life skills approach. Number two is the Accreditation and Equivalency Program. What is this? This aims to provide learners a range of alternative pathways in order that they may continue their learning outside of the formal school system and upgrade their skills and competencies in functional literacy. Another one is the Indigenous Peoples Education, wherein this aims to develop ALS intervention that is acceptable to the IPs, or indigent people in general, and specific IP communities. Remember that some of our indigenous people, they have culture, they have how do you say this? They have culture that are already in with them. So sometimes if we want to introduce something, we have to consider their culture as well. And the content is based on Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. So please take note of this. And number four is the informal education, wherein this program is focused on the packaging of special interest short-term courses for continuing education program for specific interest groups. And the last one is the madrasa education, wherein this program aims to foster better understanding between the migrant Muslims and their host communities. So what are the key issues to be considered in non-formal education? So please take note that every program is not perfect, right? And we have challenges to face on. So one is, the Philippines, as the Pearl of the Orient, had an illiteracy rate which is almost equal to other countries' total population. And you will be shocked with with the data that will be presented on the following slides. The non-formal education in the Philippines has been practiced because it has been believed to respond to the literacy and numeracy needs of learners from any stages of life. And the non-formal education means essential form of systematic learning as a response to literacy problems among learners from 10 to 64 years old. So the first issue here is the learner's literacy. As you can see, the pie chart, the diagram shows that 42.4% of the population here projected are the literate one, and 57.6 is the illiterate one. So shocking data, right? It's more than 50%. So why is that so? The literate population is composed of adults, out of school youths, and women, of which women compose the majority. Women have the right to be empowered, and evidence shows that when given the appropriate functional literacy services, they develop skills for employment and attain better health and promote their socioeconomic status. So this is why we need to empower them, and this is why the non-formal education um, has to be considered. And why many fail to participate in non-formal education opportunities. So maybe that's the reason why, because of the illiteracy rate of our population. And let's take a look back on the attendance in non-formal training. Of the 51 million population, 15 years old and over, only 19% or 9.7 million have attended a livelihood adult literacy program or non-formal training. The non-formal training actually includes those basic literacy, which is very essential for them, in functional literacy, livelihood training, basic vocational training, citizenship training, values development, and leadership training. So, given this such trainings, why is it still there? The attendance for this non-formal training is very low. So we have factors to be considered here. One is people who are multilingual found it difficult to understand the English language. So, which means that some of our, perhaps the language they use here is English, and sometimes, the technical terms they use is sometimes English, and our people, especially our IPs, cannot relate or cannot understand. So that is why they tend to, I just don't want to attend, I don't understand it. And indigenous people in some parts of the Philippines who regard education as least priority due to cultural and traditional practices. So what is the actual condition? Poor people in rural and slum dwelling areas who need to work overday just to suffice their basic needs. And people want to pursue education but have no financial capacity to sustain it. So is that what they really need? So they tend to question themselves, is education really a thing, or is this training is really a need for me? Because remember that in Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have food, water, air, shelter, sleep, and sex as the basic needs. So they tend not to consider those trainings, and they don't see it as very important. So the second issue here is innovative strategies. Now remember, this could be a part, this is a part where trainers have to consider, or the one who provide the trainings have to consider. Innovative strategies are the multimedia approach using the television, radio, newspaper, billboards, and posters that all make sense with the learner's interest. Printed learning materials like booklets and modules or lessons are provided for those who can read independently. Tutorial system which serve as reinforcing elements to help learners help themselves. So to give you a better discussion, please allow me to speak Filipino as well. So siguro, kaya din nawawalan sila ng interest dahil siguro yung mga trainers natin hindi din marunong maggamit ng mga multimedia strategies. So which is really important because some are, visual learners, some are, active sa mga ganitong bagay, or nai-enhance yung kanilang learning pag gumagamit tayo ng mga multimedia, I mean. So multiple intelligences of learners. The idea that intelligences transcend beyond the traditional scope of learning is a significant factor that educators must consider when designing and implementing curriculum. So remember na ang bawat isa sa atin merong iba't ibang kakayahan or talino. So, hindi natin dapat sila isipin na pantay-pantay lahat. So, may iba na mabilis yung pick up, may iba naman na mabagal. So, we have to consider that factor as well. Multiple intelligence. The Howard Gardner defines intelligence as the capacity to solve problems or to fashion products that are valued in one or more cultural setting. So you learn in your own unique way. So that is why I told you earlier that hindi sila pantay-pantay. So may iba na mabilis yung pick up, may iba naman na hindi. So let's continue. With regards to reward system, so ito yung mga challenge sa ating mga teachers or mga lecturers na provide itong mga strategies. This one, okay. Skinner's reinforcement theory argues that a person's positive behavior is likely increased when positively reinforced. So remember, pag meron tayong binibigay na reward sa kanila, mas na-motivate sila. I'm not telling na every time na meron silang maganda gawin, kailangan talaga natin bigyan agad ng mga reward. Or somehow we could think of ways wherein may encourage sila. Right? So, say for example, ito nga, yung reward system. The third key issue is the organizational goals and objectives. So, why this one is included in this issue? So, mahilig talaga tayo gumawa ng issue, no? As you can see in this data, the MTPDP of 2004 and 2010 included in the inner circle, as you can see. Then BESRA or BSRA 2005 to 2010, EFA 2005 to 2015. Wag masyak. I will give you the definition of this one. So to make every Filipino functionally literate, our government or the sector that is providing this one made a plan. So what is MTPDP? The MTPDP or the Medium Term Development Plan, their goal is to improve quality of life for every Filipino through people empowerment. So dyan na naman pumapasok yung challenge natin. How do we empower people? The BSRA or the Basic Education Sector Reform Agenda for 2006 to 2010 is a program of the Department of Education or DepEd. It aims to attain and sustain better performance in basic education of public schools. So, interrelated silang dalawa. And silang tatlo actually. And the organizational programs, the Philippine Education for All or the EFA 2015 plan, in which the vision is a holistic program of reforms that aims at improving the quality of basic education for every Filipino by 2015. So big word, big challenge for this one, for this Education for All program or plan. So the practices on non-formal education is being continued. However, it is clear that in developing the program, the learners' literacy, which their felt needs of education and their learning styles to enhance their intelligence must be considered. Strategies applied must be planned well in response to the learners' needs with clear account to organizational goals and objectives. So this one summarizes the challenges and the issues and what do we need to consider. In order to achieve these goals, the three key issues discussed, if clearly crafted for the implementation, significantly attribute to the successful delivery of non-formal education services. Looking back at those issues discussed, other issues like, weak political will to pursue and sustain reforms at different levels, insufficient, we can observe this one, the weak political will for some areas in our countries. So we really have to consider our leaders, our politicians in electing them so that we can push through whatever plans we have crafted. Insufficient financial resources. Oh, this one is another thing to consider. And inefficient use of available ones need further analysis in order for the non-formal education programs to move forward. So the non-formal education in the Philippines has a long history. However, implementers tend to do the same things all over again and again and expecting different results. Why? Kasi nga, hindi na-resolve yung mga issues na yun. So if the three issues previously discussed will not be given attention, then turning around the bush, right? So running in circles. So my question is, what are the challenge for us? So I will leave that question to you, and then further discussion will be made also. So that is all. That is my discussion with regards to the key issues in the non-formal education. Thank you, everyone.
The final part of the report is about the issues on the formal education in the Philippines. So it will be reported by me, Sigfred Layag. Let's go. Firstly, we're going to talk about what is formal education. So it says here it is a structured and systematic form of learning. Also, formal education or formal learning usually takes place in schools. And lastly, the formal education is given or facilitated by qualified teachers as well. Since non-formal and informal education was already been explained, let's go further and compare it to formal education. So first, it has a full-time educational pathway. Second is it's structured, planned, and facilitated. Third, it is facilitated in schools, colleges, or universities. And lastly, you're going to receive diplomas and degrees after finishing your formal education. Now we move on to the issues on the Philippine formal education. So we have here 4 categories, and we're going to dissect each of them and look into the problems that was stated within each category. So let's begin into the first one, full-time educational pathway. On this part, we're going to talk about the commitment of the students and the teachers to finish the educational tract. So the survey founded by the Philippine Institute of Developmental Studies shows that these are the following main reasons why students drop out of school and were not able to complete the educational tract. First is the lack of personal interest. Second is the high cost of education. Third is illness and disability. And fourth is other personal reasons. The second category is about the structure, the planning, and the facilitating onto the formal education. So in the recent years, after the implementation of the K-12 program, these were the certain issues that were addressed. First is the decline on higher education enrollment. After the implementation of grade 11s and 12s, most of the students after graduating, the lesser number of applicants going to college have decreased. Second is the high cost of education. So before, we only have 6 years in elementary, 4 years in high school, and 4 years in college. But now, the additional 2 years have added into the expenses in paying for the tuition. Third is still an experimental stage. It means K-12 is still being experimented by some of the teachers, and they're still adjusting on how to implement the curriculum. And of course, lastly, there are other personal reasons why there's still lapses onto the K-12 program. The third category is about the school, colleges, and universities. And this was mainly observed as a problems onto this. So after K-12 was implemented, there are more classrooms need to be built by the government for the additional secondary levels, which is the grades 11 and 12. Secondly is the decline on higher education enrollment, as I have mentioned on the previous slide. And lastly, of course, is the money needed onto the payment of this additional grade levels. Now let's move on into the fourth category, which is the issues found in the diplomas and degrees. So first is about the authenticity of these documents. It's going to talk about either your document is fake or original. So this is mainly observed when you apply overseas. They will always ask for the authenticated documents as a requirement for your employment. So the second issue is unemployment. So even though you have diplomas and degrees, it's still hard for you to find a job after graduating because most of the companies will need to have you having experience or other stuff. Third issue is jobs mismatch. So even though you graduated as a teacher, sometimes you're going to find a job that is available that's not about teaching. It's also the same with other courses that even though they graduated as for, let's say, for example, nursing, they come here in Thailand and apply as a teacher. Next issue is about the overproduced graduates. It talks about the demand on employment. For example, there was a demand for nurses, and so a lot of students took nursing. And after that, there is an overproduction of nursing graduates after 4 years.